Okay, well, thanks for joining us, everyone, to this panel, Overcoming Procurement Challenges to Maximise MedTech. I'm delighted to be joined here by our panelists. So we have Neville Young, Director of Enterprise and Innovation for Yorkshire and Humber Partners Academic Health Science Network. So thanks for joining us, Neville. We've also got Dr. Gulia Sirigu, Senior Internationalization and Innovation Advisor for Innovate UK and the Enterprise Europe Network. We also have Michael Brannigan-Harris, Chief Executive of Device Access. I'm just going to ask if each of you can give a brief introduction to yourselves, your organisation, and what you do. So if we could start with Neville, could you give an introduction to yourself, please?
Thanks, Kosta, and welcome everybody. It's great to be here today supporting this event. Yeah, I think the hop-in challenge has been overcome, so I think that's been a good experience so far. So my name's Nev Young. I work at the Yorkshire and Humber Academic Health Science Network. The Academic Health Science Networks were set up in 2013, and we're in our second licensing period now. Really, our mission is around driving innovation into practice at scale at the NHS. We're set up and funded by NHS England, but also interestingly have a commission from the Office of Life Sciences, which is part of BEARS, Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And really those two commissioners really, I think, get to the heart of how we operate as an organisation. So we're really interested from the NHS side, obviously, in improving patient outcomes. And that's one of our, key underpinning values as an organisation. Everything that we do is about improving outcomes for patients, but we're also interested in NHS efficiencies, and that can be everything from saving the NHS money to just making things run more smoothly, which I guess in many ways amounts to the same thing. So that's sort of the NHS commission side of things. The Office of Life Sciences is really interested in economic growth, building good businesses, generating economic growth in UK PLC, building sustainable businesses that create high-value jobs that contribute to the UK economy. And really, in my role within the HSN as the commercial director, I spend a lot of my time talking to companies about how we help them access into the NHS. And unfortunately, we don't have a magic wand to deliver that instantly, but we spend a lot of time talking to them about what their strategy should look like about doing that engagement with the NHS as a customer, and how we can support them to move into the NHS at scale. Not just having one or two customers and banging on doors, one after the other, and having to manage, lots of introductions to lots of people in the NHS. How can we really support them to do their work at scale? And that's challenging because we're not big organisations, but I think we've got some evidence now over the last 5 years that we can do that when we have the right tools at our disposal, and we'll probably get into that a little bit later. But I'll stop there and move on to colleagues. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks for that introduction. Gulia, would you like to give it a brief introduction to yourself?
Yes, thank you, Kosta, and good morning, everybody. I'm Giulia Sirigu. I'm one of the Senior Innovation and Internationalization Advisors working for Innovate UK Edge at one of the partners that is called Inventor. It's a company, it's a consultancy company that is supporting innovation. In my role, and as in the role of the other senior innovation advisors at Innovate UK, I provide support and advisory support to companies that are doing innovation in order to boost their growth, to help them to commercialize the products or services, and to go international. Within Innovate UK Edge, we work within we call it a family. So we work with other partners. Among them, there is KTN, so the Knowledge Transfer Network, and Catapult. All together, we work in order to provide the best possible support to those companies that are doing innovation and that are able to enable change in the society for the economy and for the UK. We help them also to grow not only within the national markets, but also in the international markets, because we are part of the Enterprise Europe network, which is including 65 countries, so not just the European countries. And we are having partners all around the world that are helping us, that are enabling us to provide the right connections for those companies that want to explore new markets. and this is more or less my role. I'm also leading the events and the activities for the Women in Innovation program within Innovate UK Edge, and this is my role.
Fantastic. And Michael, would you like to give a bit of background to yourself?
Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be involved. I work very closely with the NIHR and in particular the National Office for Clinical Research Infrastructure for the last, 10 years now. But so my background, 20 years of introducing medical devices commercially into the NHS, from gastric bands, Da Vinci robots, endovascular grafts. We transformed the way the varicose veins were treated in 2005 to 9 with a company called Venous Closure, which then got selected as a national showcase by NHS Innovations. And that led me into the corridors of NICE. And we work very closely with NICE now for coming up to 11 years. So we're very proud to have taken over 45 products through NICE's program. So we're the sort of leading agency in terms of getting national approvals and recommendations. There's nothing better for a medical device company to have a NICE recommendation. It has global implications, and contractually NHS hospitals under their standard contracts are obliged to have regard to NICE guidance. So our goals are to get products through NICE. So a lot of the work we do is really helping companies to understand the evidence requirements. We're a holder of the NICE license as a MedTech early technology assessment or technical assessment license holder. So two things: we're licensed to help companies through a program at NICE to understand the evidence, and secondly, we have a license and have done for almost 7 years with NHS Digital, which enables us to understand how patients are treated today and the outcomes and costs. So we have incredible insight into the NHS, and so we do work predominantly with North American companies. We don't work very much with we don't work much with UK companies because there doesn't ever appear to be that many that have the right ingredients, and those ingredients are really down to what I'll be talking about later, is the principles of market access and going around introducing things using the principles of market access instead of the principles of marketing, which is why they often end up talking to procurement managers about their products, which in our opinion is the last person in the chain that should be making those decisions.
I think we've got some fantastic experience here, and all your organizations play a really key part in the ecosystem. And what I'd say to everybody watching is, if anybody wants to connect with our speakers, then just drop us an email and let us know, when we'll make some introductions. So let's start with our panel today. So we're now here focused on overcoming procurement challenges to maximize MedTech innovation. And I think one of the important things to consider is that some of the challenges that are faced by the healthcare system are escalating costs, low value care, disparities in patient outcomes, and improving efficiency in healthcare delivery. And today we're really looking at into how improvements in the procurement process can maximize that adoption of new technology that contributes to solving these challenges. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a question to each of our panelists. And I'll start with Mike. And so what I'd like to say is the NHS is very fragmented. I think we've identified that from Sir John's talk earlier, and rationalized has a rationalized procurement market with no central procurement door. But it's with the regionalized nature of hospital CCGs that there might be other doors to knock on. What do you think, Mike, is the best way for a startup to find the right door in this fragmented procurement landscape?
I mean, to start with, all healthcare systems are fragmented. So, if you go to other countries, they have multiple coverage insurers. I mean, in the US, there's something like 300 different insurance plans to deal with. So I think there's nothing unique about the fragmentation of the NHS or any healthcare system being fragmented. I think the problem about this difficult entry from which we hear repeatedly from the industry, is that they don't know how to interact with the NHS. They fail to come across with the right messages. I mean, to turn up at hospitals and say, we have innovation, we can save you money, is not what the hospitals are interested in. Hospitals are interested in operational gain. They want to do more with less, and they want to hit targets and generate income. They're businesses like GP practices. So that the industry has to get their head round. They're having the wrong conversations and they're using the wrong messages. The second thing that they need to recognise, if they want to talk about saving the NHS money, then they go to the payers of care, and that's the CCGs and NHS England. And so few of them actually manage to get there because they've got nothing to say except we're innovative and we can save money, with no actual evidence that they can do that. And we sit on the largest database probably in the world of health data, where we can understand how patients are treated, where they're treated, what they're treated with, and what the outcomes are. And there's opportunity to understand what the impact of medical devices are. So going into hospitals using the principles of marketing, which is the same as trying to sell dog food in a supermarket, where you build a thing and you say, well, it costs us 50 pence to make, let's sell it for £2 and let's try and get a bulk deal, is marketing. If you're able to use the principles of market access, which are the 4 Ps. So you have 4 Ps of marketing, which is product, price, place, promotion, dog food selling. Or the principles of market access are about benefits. And those 4 benefits are for 4 things beginning with P. The first one is the patient. Whatever happens, that product has to benefit the patient. The second P that benefits is the provider of care. The hospital has to benefit from using it. And the driving force, and we've seen it repeatedly with the technologies that we've driven into the NHS, from varicose veins to benign prostatic hyperplasia products, is about operational gain and profit. Hospitals want to hit target and make money. The third P about the third P of market access, third benefit P, is the payer of care. So whoever's paying for that care, NHS England or the CCG, has to benefit from paying for it. And that generally means robust, durable treatments with fewer complications, fewer readmissions, and long-term cost. And the difficulties come when companies go in and try and sell expensive products that may be better for the payer, but they're not, they're too expensive for the provider to buy because they're used to paying less for something else. And the communication between the provider of the medical device and the payer of care is NICE. And so I don't see it as a fragmented system, as we've got NICE there to demonstrate the cost effectiveness, right? So it's not complicated if you understand what you're dealing with and the information is there. The last P of market access that you need to think about is the product benefit. And product benefit is around optimizing access to patients and maximizing price, because you're a business as well, right? So you have to sell something that you can sell at a justifiable price which is optimized, and you need to make sure it reaches as many patients that need it. And they are the 4 Ps of market access. So going back to the question, fragmented doors, I don't see it as fragmented. It's about understanding what you're dealing with, understanding the 4 Ps of market access, and starting and having conversations early with NICE, and using the fantastic network of the NIHR and NOCRI to help to do any research in the NHS at a national level. So that's my sort of response to that question.
I think you made some very valid points. Very often we work with so many MedTech startups, and they're either going to a certain part of the NHS, NHSX, Drive, or a particular accelerator that works with the NHS, and they're just getting lost within the system. And I think all the factors that you bring about, some of the more mature scale-ups take those on and manage to go and get adoption in 100 CCGs, because they do all those things that you say, getting evidence and showing impact. But a lot of the very early stage startups don't understand that and don't understand what's expected of them. So I think all your points will have helped a lot of the companies that are listening in. If we now move on to Neville, re-procurement is prevalent for an NHS procurer. It's much easier to simply buy the same thing again than have to change new technology. How do you think that we can ensure that new technologies are given a fair chance in the procurement system?
Well, I think Michael's summed it up pretty well. I think he's got hold of a lot of this stuff that we need to do, and those 4 Ps are really, really relevant. If I might add another P to that list, I might suggest that understanding where your product sits in an entire pathway is also very useful as well. So, as well as who the provider and the payer of care is, what are the impacts of your product on other bits of the system? So if it's being used in primary care and the benefits are in secondary care, really understanding that pathway of where those benefits fall, where the costs occur and where the benefits fall, and be able to describe those as part of your value proposition, I think are really, really important. And I think one of the other things, Michael really sensibly mentioned NICE is a really good place to go to get, really good, solid evidence that you can take to the NHS about why you should be using your product. But that can take quite a bit of time. And even with NICE evidence, there can be some challenges around adoption, particularly at scale. I think one of the other things that we're really interested in at the HSNs at the moment is this idea of generating real world evidence around your product and how it works in the wild, so to speak, once it's been deployed into a system outside of a sort of a controlled environment where maybe you generated a lot of your initial evidence. And that's really about closing a gap that sometimes exists, particularly in the early phase companies who are just coming onto the market. That gap between, we know it works, we can prove that it does work, and that step into the system where can we demonstrate that it does work in practice in the real world, and understanding that there is a gap there between diagnostic accuracy and something working in the system and delivering benefits at scale. And I think increasingly as HSNs and others in the system, and I would include NICE in this, there's an increasing recognition that actually, going that little bit further and developing some of that evidence in a real world setting about how your product works in an entire pathway with all of the buffeting that it will get from the system when it's deployed is something that's really, really important as well. And I think particularly at the moment in a world where so much of care is being pushed out into, we want to treat patients at home, not in the hospital. There are real challenges there emerging, but there's also real opportunities. And we've worked with a couple of companies recently on real world evidence projects around, sending a diagnostic kit to someone's home. And actually, one of the key findings there is not whether it works or not, it's whether the person opens the envelope when it arrives. And that gets to, I think, to Michael's point about, providing value to the purchaser of the product as well. So I think understanding how things work in the real world across an entire pathway is something that, particularly from an HSN perspective, we're talking a lot about at the moment, and how we do that better. Because if we get that better, that really helps a company scale up at pace. So they may have their NICE evidence and their diagnostic accuracy evidence or whatever that is, but understanding how you scale up at pace and understanding some of the uncertainty in that and building a template for implementation based on that real world evidence is something that we think is something that's really useful and worth pursuing, and will add more value to those 4 Ps that Michael's been talking about as well.
I think you make some very interesting points there. I think we also have to consider the patient perspective in the interaction with the procurer as well, not just what's applicable to, let's say, the trust, the CCG, etc. Because at the end of the day, it's the patients that are going to benefit the most in one way or another, depending on what the technology is. If we move on to Julia now, what I'd say is, so we've looked at this a bit more, and in response to the EU's public procurement directive calling for new methodologies, I think MedTech Europe, BCG, procurement experts have really developed a value-based procurement approach, and some of this includes outcomes that matter to patients, clinical evidence, cost of care delivery, benefits for various health actors. environmental and social sustainability, and wider economic and public health benefits, which have been implemented by early adopters, with examples like NHS Wales. From your perspective, Julia, how can we ensure more MedTech tenders follow a holistic approach?
Well, first of all, there are two ways that we need to consider to follow. One is the one that is driven by the companies, and the other one are the tenders per se. I cannot speak for the government, of course, but there is already an attempt to look at and create tenders that are more inclusive, that are applying a more holistic approach. So if we check what has been done in 2020 during the pandemic, we can see that there is a huge number of calls that are more demand-shaped, and that can facilitate the connections between the existing innovators and the key players. And these are particularly important. So we saw an increase, for instance, in the eligibility criteria to be environmentally friendly or to don't be harming the environment. There is more attention to the patient needs, for instance. And the general aim is to meet the demand that is already present in the market. So not just focusing on the NHS, because we need to remember that MedTech products are not just focused on the NHS. So they need to, as Michael was mentioning and Neville was mentioning too, we need to take care of which are the key players that are involved in the presence of this innovation, of this tech, and that are benefiting from this tech. So patients, care workers, even the same society. So when we are talking about aging society, silver economy, we need to consider also the positive and cascade effect that can have on the society. So in the last calls in 2020, we saw this change. Innovation at this point plays a very, very important role, and especially considering what we are living, so the pandemic. So Innovate UK providing more funds for this reason, also to provide financial and advisory support to companies that were developing innovative solutions that were able specifically to meet new and different requirements of the society. They were able to meet the difficulties created by the pandemic, for instance. And they, of course, were generating more problem to patients, for instance. Very, very, very simple. I really love very simple examples. But for a patient in a COVID situation, it's much more difficult to reach the GP. For a patient, it's more difficult to reach certain therapies. How can we facilitate this through innovation? Fortunately, we are living 2021 already, actually. So we need to make the most of this type of innovation that is present, and the government and Innovate UK especially, through the calls, through the advisors, is trying to do that. Just to give you some numbers, the last year, 550 million pounds have been used by Innovate UK to support business doing innovation during the COVID pandemic, which has seen a huge increase in the number of applications, but also a huge increase in the type of support that has been provided to the companies, because the companies need to be able to commercialize the product to survive within a market environment, not just thinking that they need to focus just on entering the public sector. They need to be innovators at 360 degrees. They need to be able to innovate. For this reason, there is more and more requests for advice or specializations, for instance, MedTech or in other sectors, but there is also an increase of the type of services that are provided to the companies in order to help them to refine their value propositions, to understand which are the connections, which are the procurement processes, which are very, very difficult, what they need to know and what they need to do in order to internationalize. As Michael was mentioning, it's not about seeing something as a difficult thing, but it's about understanding how the difficult thing can work, can be included in our business and innovation plans. So for this reason, well, there is plenty of support, and I will always suggest to companies to ask for the support. The support available is available in collaboration, as mentioned before, with KTN, with HSN, that is doing an incredible work in order to support companies, in order to favor this connection between technology innovation and the public sector and the NHS. But also, what I would like to underline is that this type of support is available not only for the Innovate UK winners, so the Innovate UK competition winners, but is available for all those companies that are doing innovation and they would like to develop their innovation, to grow and to scale, of course, as a company, and to commercialize the product, knowing what there is around. So with a good understanding of what they need to do.
And so these are some of the best practices that that Innovate UK is. This is what Innovate UK is doing to support some of these best practices.
Yes, definitely. And in terms of best practices, Innovate UK is also trying, and Innovate UK Edge are always trying to give visibility also to good practices through both the website, through special publications, and through the events, for instance. So we really care about the companies that are doing innovation, because we know that it's difficult. It's difficult to do business. It's difficult to enter in a difficult system, and it's difficult to be an expert in everything, because we cannot be experts in everything. We can be amazing doctors, amazing researchers, but what happens most of the time, amazing researchers, they don't know how to approach the business market. But it's normal. It's normal, because we cannot be geniuses and know everything. So this support is helping companies to do that and providing best practices also for the other companies already present in the ecosystem. They want to grow, they want to scale, and they need this type of support. So definitely, and there is another important thing, companies that of course are included in the ecosystem can provide input, can provide feedback also to the Innovate UK Edge advisors, for instance. And this feedback and this impact will be inputted within Innovate UK through the, of course, as every institution, as every company, we are having periodic meetings and periodic reviews. So we are inputting this feedback obtained by the companies in order to improve the general system. Of course, it's not a quick process, but there are some ways to do this.
I think you make some really valid points, and all of you do. And I think going back to Sir John's points this morning about the collaboration between academia, industry, is very important. We often make a lot of connections between MedTech startups and universities to look at doing joint Innovate UK bids, or forming a consortium with other SMEs. Also joining this, we've facilitated quite a few successful bids between Bournemouth University and different AI startups like Adaptai and Shopper and others, and also working with a partner. So I know on our chat here we've got Ian Sharp from Future Health, who's one of our partners. I'm sure a few of you know him, and he also works with a lot of great startups to do bids and really help them kind of navigate through the procurement puzzle as it is, particularly for a lot of startups. So I think you can go at it alone and put in these bids alone. I think you can go with a partner like a university, and also or go with a delivery partner like Future Health, for example. I think there's some great support out there. If we move on to our second question, really. So this is for all the panelists. In your opinion, how has COVID-19 affected the procurement process, and what can be done to get the right technologies into the right hands more quickly? Let's go first.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because I've been following it all very, very, very closely. And when you really think about it, what saved the nation so far, it's been MedTech. It's been MedTech, right? It's been diagnostics, ventilators and PPE, which are all medical devices. The government put a lot of emphasis on this vaccine. NICE were not doing any evaluations of diagnostics, and it was sent to PHE to do. So I mean, I'm not sure. I don't want to get into politics here, but we desperately need. I mean, today Abbott announced a 15-minute self-COVID-19 test. That needs to be rolled out. But I think we've got to take a step back though and think about what this has meant for the medtech industry and for the whole of the medical industry. It's shown that, if you were if you were an Army, Navy, or an Air Force and you had this attack on you, then you'd look for early defense weapons, and those early defense weapons are diagnostics, right? So I think the diagnostic industry is going to get a huge boost out of this. MedTech industry is doing incredibly well. We had our best year ever last year as a consultancy. You only need to look at the stock prices of these companies to see how well they're doing. So we're all in the right world here. I think there's always going to be difficulties in scaling up when there's been, NHS England, PHE have been pretty bombarded with everything in the world that says they can diagnose a product, a condition, but getting it through regulatory approval we've shown that we're ahead of the world in doing that, right? Particularly ahead of Europe in getting the COVID vaccines approved. So we have the ability and the flexibility to be free to do that quickly. So yeah, I think, it's all about who you go to get these things approved. And I go back to what I say previously is as with all medical devices and diagnostics, you have to start off as if you are talking to NHS England about them and have a clear vision as to what your device is going to do, and that it's not just going to be innovative and save money. It's got to be able to, you've got to be able to describe the population that needs it, what your intervention will do to that population, what happens today, and what the outcome differences are. And that's called PICO, population, intervention, comparator, and outcome. That's the building block of how to position your product for evaluation wherever you go, in whichever country you go to. So that's my take on that question.
Thanks for
that's helpful.
Mike. Neville or Giulio, who wants to go next?
I'll let Julia take that.
Okay, that's fine. Well, definitely. Well, the procurement process has been affected, but I'm a quite positive person. I think that not everything can seen from a negative lens. I mean, due to the new exigencies that we are seeing in the market, the procurement process sometimes can be also facilitated by the presence of new technologies, for instance, and the fact that there is the necessity to obtain new technologies could, in this particular historical moment, could facilitate the entrance of this new technology in the healthcare system, both at the national and international level. So in order to help companies to enter into the system, again, my first suggestion is understand very well what they are doing, who is benefiting from what they are doing. And I really love the 4 Ps that Michael mentioned before. They are really important, because if you are not even clear which is your business perspective in terms of what you are doing, it's very difficult to be able to find the right speakers or to find the right connections for you in order to enter within the system. So I will say the most important thing is to do a bit of introspective business work on what companies are doing in order to don't lose time just having an approach that is like, I contact everybody I can contact. No, save energies. So my suggestion would be save energies. Try to understand which are your key priorities, which are your key points of contacts, and contact them, spending your energy in that. Sometimes, as mentioned before, companies are struggling doing this, but again, support is here, support is present. So companies need and can, and this free support, this governmental support, they can tap into it, ask for suggestion. I saw before a comment actually about the difficulty in understanding by Innovate UK what is real innovation. Sometimes the key problem is, for instance, that we are not speaking the same language. And as every problem communication, we need to speak the same language in order to enter into something, in order to understand something. So from one point of view, yes, everything is more difficult because the whole system is somehow changing, but there are a lot of new opportunities in terms also to speeding up certain processes. We saw what NHS Wales is doing. A lot of new technologies are already entering Wales. And of course, a more value-oriented approach is important. So a demand-shaped approach is very important, because this is what patients are needing, what the system and the healthcare sector is needing, but also what doctors are needing. So we need to consider it from a holistic point of view.
So I'll pile in now with my tuppence worth. So I think winners and losers in COVID. I think there's definitely been winners and losers. I think if you're involved in supplies to theatres, you've probably struggled over the last year, just in your normal business, never mind innovating in that space. If you're a digital provider of telemedicine, for example, you've probably done very well. And there's some reasons why that's occurred. But I think if we look at digital first primary care, for example, that's been pushed really hard right from the start with COVID. Let's keep patients at home. Let's not have them in GP surgeries. Let's keep them out of hospital. So the providers in that space who have had technologies available for a great number of years have actually really penetrated the market in a massive way over the past year. Now, are those products innovative? Well, they probably were when they emerged, 5 to 10 years ago, but are they really truly innovative for the future? Well, that's another challenge that will face those individual companies over the next year or two, because essentially they've been pushed into the system at no cost to the system, but there will be coming a crunch either this year or next year when business cases and plans will need to go to CCGs and payers about whether they're going to continue with some of those systems. But having said that, I think there probably is a permanent shift now in healthcare, both in primary and secondary care, to doing more remote patient monitoring. And I think there will be opportunities going forward in that digital space for really clever innovators to get in there and access that market. And what has happened to help that? Well, there's been an emergence in the digital space, particularly around NHSX, of these dynamic procurement frameworks rapidly pulled together with lists of suppliers on it that makes it really easy for payers to procure those digital products. I would like to think that we'll see more of those dynamic procurement systems emerge that really meet the needs of the system in a rapid way and that are not fixed. That means if you're not on it on day one, there's no chance to get on it for another 2 or 3 years. So I think that dynamism in procurement needs to be something we look at, and particularly around digital. And I think digital is the space. So we've talked about digital and how that's going to transform care. I think that's really happening now. But there's loads and loads more innovation to happen in that space to really exploit the opportunities there. And I think people who understand digital and data and how to move data around will do well and are doing well. So how do you connect your data from your device back into an electronic patient record? How do you do that in a safe and secure way? Understanding the systems and regulations and the standards that exist in that space are really, really important. And I think people who are agile enough to respond to all of those needs will meet the opportunities and do well in that space. But it's tricky, difficult. It's a moving target at the moment with COVID, and central command is still in place, dictating really what systems are doing at the moment, and that will stop at some point, and things will revert back to more local decision making around what is procured, and that's often based on system need. And really, it will circle back right round to Michael's 4 Ps in the end. Can you provide value to the system around your product and articulate that clearly in a way that shows benefit to patients, the payer, the system as a whole? And if you can do that, then you will always have an opportunity to do well. I think my final point, Kostas, is I think NHS England are trying to grasp this nettle a little bit at the moment as well. The move with the ASC, the Accelerated Access Collaborative, to supporting the MedTech funding mandate is something that's going to be with us from April this year, with contractual obligation to take products that have NICE approval, who are on the MedTech funding mandate, into use in healthcare systems. That's going to be with us from April. I think that's a really good positive step by NHS England to support that. There's only going to be a few in year one, and they're all going to have savings in year, which is a challenging bar for a lot of medtech companies and health tech companies, but that will probably change within the next 12 months as well. And I think there's currently talk of expanding that out to benefits being seen in 3 years. So I would encourage people watching to have a look at the ASE Collaborative and look at the MedTech funding mandate, and the type of evidence that is required for the products that are on that should be the type of evidence that you're trying to create now. And I think, as again, Michael's 4 Ps will keep you in good stead if you keep that in mind about how you want to position your product to become potentially a MedTech funding mandate list.
Yeah, I think just to say I agree, and I'm excited like you are about the world of digital. I think it's got to happen. Traditionally, it's very difficult because these digital wearable technologies, if they're not being used in a hospital and they're being used in somebody's home, there's got to be a mechanism of payment. And the mechanism of payment for those types of things traditionally is prescription. And none of them some of them are getting on prescription now. We work with one company to get a wearable device for continuous or measuring glucose levels through NICE. But I think that's the challenge. But just, wrapping up really about the word procurement, the market access journey always is between the sales companies and these clinicians, and the industry has to be better prepared to give those clinicians the right information to help that product get approved within a hospital. If they're being sent to procurement managers in hospitals, I don't think that they have, do they have the authority and the knowledge to make decisions? I think that's traditionally what's happened. I think the industry needs to smarten up, understand who they're talking with, getting up the carpeted areas of hospital to get their value proposition through. And you can't expect a doctor to do that. So they have to be smarter at understanding the business of a hospital, what their offering is and how it's going to help them with operational gain. That's the big thing, is operational gain for hospitals. So, yeah.
Thanks for all those points. I'm just going to take a question from the audience. We've got one from Adam Bryant, who's the co-founder and CEO of CanSense. So Adam said, can you say more about diagnostics in primary care and the exact considerations that should be made when trying to address this procurement process? Somebody want to answer that?
Well, I can have a go. I'm not sure how exact I'll be, so don't hold me to it. But I think it's a bit like Michael said. There's a value proposition that needs to be understood for primary care, and CCGs are procuring things to be used in primary care. Our GPs on board with it as well. Who are the end users? What do patients think? All of those things need to be factored in. But at the moment, in particular, I think thinking about some of the backlogs in the system at the moment and how you're going to be helping the system deal with that is really, really important. And I think, having to frame what you're trying to do in that context of now is really, really important. So what you were trying to do 18 months ago in primary care probably isn't as relevant as what's going on in primary care now. So if I think of some of the work that we're doing in the HSN around the cancer referral, the 2-week wait pathway. So, the backlog there is absolutely enormous. And 18 months ago, we were talking to companies about better and more accurate diagnosis of cancer. At the moment, there's more emphasis almost at the moment about how we can rule people out of that pathway, not accurately diagnose what type of cancer they have, but can we get the bottom 20% who don't need to be in that pathway out of that pathway? So I think, and that's the same technology, but it's just reframing slightly your business case to address the pertinent need in the system at the moment as well. So I think if you can do those sorts of things, then I think we can start to think about how we bring something to primary care that is a proposition that they'll be interested in and get that pitch right and that language right. And I think that's something to bear in mind at the moment, certainly in the current sort of COVID environment they're in as well. So how are you really going to help ease some of the pressure in the system by what you're doing is something that's really important. And just flipping your argument really from diagnostic accuracy to being able to rule out people who don't need to go any further in the system might be something that you need to think about as an example. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's the sort of conversations we're having with people who are innovating in primary care at the moment. And I'll finish off Mike's point. If you can't get GPs on board with it, you're really going to struggle as well. So doing that GP engagement is really, really important as well.
Thank you very much for that, Neville. Did either of you wanted to add to that, or should we finish?
I was just going to say, we've just launched a new product, which is called Episodes, which is a blend of historic hospital activity with future waiting list volumes, and we've got an algorithm where we can calculate how long the waiting lists are by hospital, by speciality, and by diagnostic test, and look historically to see how that hospital performed that particular treatment. And we've got what we've built is an operational gain dashboard where you can help to solve problems in hospitals where, you know, they have the longest waiting list and they have for example, the longest length of stay. And particularly with the cancer challenges, we've seen, you know, the delays in colonoscopies and diagnostic colonoscopies that are going to have a big knock-on effect as time goes on, we all know. But I think that we do have an incredible, you know, the NHS has incredible data. It's a single healthcare payer system. It's internationally, globally recognised, and there are ways of being able to solve problems. But you really do need to understand the pressures of the hospitals to get them to do anything. We've seen, as I said earlier, repeatedly, if there's revenue generation, operational gain, helping hospitals hit their targets, they're the things that have been adopted the quickest, with obviously the nice endorsement on top. So yeah, we've got the opportunity for MedTech is bigger than ever, and the opportunity for innovation to solve these problems, because the NHS is not going to be the same anymore. People are going to be at home. They're going to be monitored at home. Technology has existed for 10 years that's done that. It's going to have to happen now. They're going to have to get round this purchasing of things that aren't on prescription issue, and for the savings of £350 to £400 per day in hospital, get these patients monitored at home and out of hospital, and free up capacity to get these cancer patients and all this diagnostic stuff that's 100% bigger than it is this time last year, get it through the system. And that's got to be the priority. So industry, you have to understand the pressures, you have to understand the patient, provider, payer, and what the product benefits are for you to commercialize that product, and whether it's worth you doing it, whether there's enough money in it for you to do that or not. So that's my view on it.
I'm afraid we're going to have to cut off. I've got to head back to the main stage myself. We do have a question from Ravi Kumar, but I hope I'm going to close this session down and direct everybody out. But I wonder if somebody could, from the panel, just jump on the chat and answer that question if you've got an opinion. But for everybody else that's joining us, we're going to go over to the digital exhibition for 5 minutes. So please go and check out some of the MedTech startups. Feel free to chat on video and click the Super Connect Me button if you want us to connect you. I'm going to head over to the main stage and see you there at 12:30, and we're going to have 5 pitches from 5 of those MedTech startups. So that will be CanSense. So Adam, who's joined us here. We'll also have MyM Health. We'll also have Glycan Age and Bold Health. And our final one is QV Bio. So yeah, I will see you on the main stage in 5 minutes. And yeah, enjoy the exhibition. And thank you so much to all our panelists for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem at all. Thanks, everyone.